All right, so I'm going to introduce myself again. My name is Erin Piat. I'm based in Madison at the Center for Community and Economic Development, and I coordinate the statewide community food systems team. So welcome to the Leadership Wisconsin and Food Systems webinar. This webinar is supported by the UW Extension Leadership Wisconsin program and the Community Food Systems team. Leadership Wisconsin is a 2-year leadership experience that brings Wisconsin residents from diverse backgrounds outside the traditional classroom to develop personal, interpersonal, and organizational skills and broaden participants' understanding of local, state, and national issues so they can apply leadership skills to affect positive change in a dynamic, multicultural world. The Community Food Systems team supports colleagues around the state programming in food systems, and the team builds capacity for food systems by connecting colleagues, developing and sharing resources, and building skills through peer learning. So in September, Leadership Wisconsin took a group of community leaders and UW Extension educators to the San Francisco Bay Area to learn about food systems and community leadership. The group met with farmers, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are impacting the food system, and today you'll hear about each of the presenters' experiences, what they learned, and potential implications for leadership and food systems work in Wisconsin. Today our presenters are Victoria Solomon, the Community Resource Development Educator in Greene County, Ryan Shoni, the Food Systems Manager, and he also works for Journey House in Milwaukee County, and Joseph Malal, the Community Resource Development Educator in Chippewa County. And a bit of housekeeping before we get started. First off, a thank you to Greg Lawless and Megan Wicker for providing us with tech support. And if your screen happens to freeze or you lose sound during the webinar, please double check to make sure your speaker or headset is plugged in. And if everything is plugged in, then please exit the webinar and re-enter using the same link you initially used. And if you have questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat box. In the chat box, you'll have a choice about who to send your question or comment to, and please choose everyone so we can all see it. If you do have a private chat with another participant, that's fine, but please note that even the private chats will be recorded and archived. Now that's all I have, so thanks for joining us, and I'll hand it off to Victoria.
Okay, great, thank you. Please go on to the next slide. I'm Victoria Solomon. I'm Conrad in Greene County. I'm also working with Leadership Wisconsin to help deliver their signature program that Erin was sort of just talking about. As part of that program, there is a regional seminar part of the curriculum, and that just really provides an opportunity to learn from other areas of the U.S. and look at issues in different perspectives. So this year the seminar was in September. It was in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we looked at leadership lessons and the food system. And before going any further, I just want to give credit to Catherine Emanuel and Mike Maddox for doing a lot of the planning and structure. And a great thing that we found when putting this together was that it was fantastic partnering with California Extension and learning from them and really connecting with their networks and going out there. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the trip to sort of get you situated, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ryan and Joseph as they were participants, and they'll be sharing more of the lessons learned. So if you can switch to the next slide, I want to get into some context. This is our lovely group. We had about 14 participants, and Catherine and I were facilitating. We spent the week meeting with community leaders who are working within the food system in a variety of ways. And our learning objectives are on the screen there. We were working on learning more about building coalitions, engaging volunteers, enhancing change in communities, and understanding policy lenses. You can see with looking at this list, these are all leadership components that are really transferable in communities, whether in Wisconsin or California or rural communities or urban areas. For each of these, we were able to meet with people who are working successfully on the ground in these areas. We also had a special workshop that focused on leadership lessons from improv. This is a bit different, and if you hadn't had the opportunity to participate in a session like this, I'd strongly encourage you to check it out. If you're working with a group that's maybe looking for ways to build leadership and team building skills, improv sessions provide a really great way to practice collaboration, and it's a really interactive educational experience. So we were able to incorporate that into the seminar curriculum as well. Next slide, please. So these are just some photos of some of the places that we were able to visit and connect with. I want to give a quick overview of some of these places. Voila Juice is a small business that grew out of a food cart. It processes fruits into juices and sells it in the San Francisco Bay Area and really focuses on a local distribution there. Sonoma Ag Park supports beginning farmers and focuses on education around sustainable farming. Marshall Cottle Park is a farm that is now currently surrounded by development and urban area. And the family there had said that they wanted to really dedicate the farm to becoming a park where people can go and learn about agriculture and different practices. So that's really a great location for education now in what's now an urban area. Valley Verde is a community program and an educational program that empowers people to grow their own food. It's a great example of somebody who had a vision, communicated that vision in a really effective way to engage and inspire volunteers from the community to get involved. SPUR is the San Francisco Bay Area Planning and Urban Research Association. They focus on civic planning, and we were able to meet with them and talk about the implications of different policies on the food system and how they were working with different groups who had, different perspectives on the best way to address food insecurity, for example, and how, those groups may have concerns about a policy and had struggles getting and working together, even though they sort of had a shared vision. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, Grow Incubators, an incubator and a community space. It also has a community garden where they really encourage people to sort of come and harvest the food that is grown there. Next slide. So we visited a number of community farms. There are a number of them shown there. We also went to and met with the Fruitvale Unity Council, which is an organization that's working to build a very vibrant community in Fruitvale, which is a really diverse neighborhood in Oakland. They developed the Fruitvale Transit Village, which I believe you can kind of see there. It's a great model of transit-oriented development and mixes retail, housing, and public transit. And they're really looking to use that space to create a really vibrant community. So we met with a number of these community leaders. We also met with an app developer who created an app called Co-Garden. I definitely recommend checking it out. It's essentially a way to build relationships within communities. So a person can go on, you can list, what you grow or maybe a space you have or skills you want to share. And just, it really encourages and enables people to connect in their community. So I think that's a great example of a resources that stakeholders across Wisconsin can, might be interested in using and could be applicable, and used in Wisconsin as well. So just some overarching key takeaways, just as some examples, everywhere we went, we heard the leaders talk about, maybe the most important thing that they saw was building and sustaining relationships, and that they saw those as really key to being able to achieve the things that they wanted to achieve. So that was an overarching theme by and large. Everyone we met with had a dream or a vision, and they held to that. They were highly committed to that, and were able to communicate that in a way that was just really attractive to stakeholders and engage volunteers. And at the same time, so they worked to plant the seeds, but they were flexible in their approach as long as it was still working towards that vision. So they were still very flexible in sort of how they got there. We saw lots of examples of ways people were engaging in coalitions and engaging volunteers, and how that impacted the way that they made things happen. So for example, one group, Valley Verde, didn't build as much of a coalition because they were able to inspire and engage volunteers so much that they've been able to accomplish their goals with volunteers from the community, and they've had people just really attracted to what they're trying to achieve and get involved that way. We saw a number of different ways people were effectively engaging volunteerism. Some of the lessons learned from that were just project planning is absolutely essential, so organizations could clearly communicate the goals that they had and how the work that the volunteers do really makes an impact. Obviously recognizing and appreciating whatever a person can give, however big or small that might be, or whatever form that might be, and providing clear expectations of volunteers. So those are just some kernels of things that we saw sort of across the different places that we visited and the people that we met with and learned from, that I think are definitely applicable, whether California or Wisconsin. I'm going to hand it over now to Ryan to talk more about, the experience that he had and the lessons that he learned as he saw this.
Good morning, everyone. Ryan Shoni. I'm Food Systems Manager in Milwaukee County, Milwaukee County UW Extension, and I also work with an organization called Journey House on Milwaukee's near south side. About half of my time is spent there over the next year. We're doing a 2-year food systems initiative there that I'm managing. So I wanted to really focus in on the whole measures portion of the trip, and kind of how I saw the whole measures being integrated into different projects that we visited. So we're going to go to the next slide, please. So hopefully you've encountered these, and if you haven't, it's on the, if you just search for UW Extension whole measures for community food system, it'll come up. It's on our website. But these are the different key values that we've determined. And at the bottom you can see that it says, we took that from the Center for Whole Communities and Community Food Security Coalition and adapted it for the Community Food Systems team. So justice and fairness, vibrant farms and gardens, healthy people, sustainable ecosystems, thriving economies, strong communities. And I put systems thinking and collaboration at the top because in my personal opinion, the success of these other 6 oftentimes really hinges on the collaboration and the systems thinking of how do these different pieces fit together and how do they complement one another. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about 2 of the different programs, organizations that we visited, because these were 2 that really stood out for me as being exemplary models of integrating many of the different whole measures into what they were doing and really being intentional about thinking in a systems manner and really being intentional about collaboration. So Voila was actually the first field trip that we made, and Victoria alluded to it as it being a juice company that started, I believe, back in the 70s in a little push cart next to a train station in San Francisco, and slowly but surely it grew to become a multi-million-dollar company that it is today, distributing fresh juice products all across the San Francisco Bay Area region and other regions of California. So the key, I'm trying to move my view of the people. Here we go. So the key whole measures that I saw being integrated at Voila was thriving local economies. And with that, Their focus was regional. I think they've had requests to expand beyond that, but they felt that they could be the most sustainable and produce the good quality product that they are by staying regional for the time being. And it was very clear that they were successful in that model and it had made it economically viable. And that they were supporting the farmers fairly for paying for the ingredients that they're using. They were also supporting their employees by paying a very fair living wage to them and including benefits, even from the top of the administrative folks all the way down to the people working on the assembly line, actually making the juice. Justice and fairness, that also really ties into the fair wages for what they were paying. I believe it was $15 or maybe $18 an hour that they were paying the employees who worked on the floor. And that they also very intentionally hired from within the neighborhood of where Voila was located. That they didn't pull people from all over, but they wanted to support the surrounding neighborhood of where they were located at. Now, one downside or one challenge that I saw in the realm of justice and fairness was the cost of the juice. So one of these little 12-ounce, I believe it was, containers of juice retails for around $3.50, $4 a bottle. Now, for folks who are on the lower scale of income, that's not going to be very attainable. But he did mention that they offer some different donations to work with organizations and provide free juice, different sustainability. So they were very intentional about where they source their ingredients from, working directly with the farmers that they get the fruit from. And they offer an organics line. Not all of their products are organic, and I think that's one way that they are able to keep costs down if they want to be able to afford it, by offering a non-organic line that's a little bit less expensive. But they also have their organic line. They also use a lot of recycled materials for their bottles and their packaging products. Healthy people, that should be pretty obvious, and that those who are drinking the juice, which is fully juice and there's not other added ingredients into it, are going to be healthier. And it's not just juice in the sense of something you'd have for breakfast, but it also has a lot of, in some cases, protein and can be filling and provide you necessary energy. And then systems thinking and collaboration. So it was very obvious that over the last 30 or so years that they've been in business, they've been intentional and conscious about how these different elements of their business are connected to one another, what sort of impact they have on their surrounding neighborhood, partnering with other organizations, and having strong relationships with the distributors and the grocery outlets that they're selling to. That really came off and impressed me. Next slide, please. The second organization that I was really impressed by was City Slicker Farms. Rodney Spencer is the gentleman that I'm standing next to in this photo. And he's someone that comes across to me as being what I would call a grounded visionary. He has a lot of fantastic, very creative ideas, but at the same time, he's able to deliver on those ideas and to make them happen. And he's a realist about what can work and what doesn't. Farms and gardens, or Vibrant Farms and Gardens. Just stepping into this space, it was very evident that their farm was filled with vibrancy, from what they were growing to the very healthy looking produce, to the murals on the wall, to the people who were filtering in and out of that space. Thriving local economies. Rodney was very astute and aware of what it takes to make a sustainable organization in the economic sense. They were pulling in revenue from many different streams and sources, and this is something that I really followed up with him on because it was something that I'm interested in this day and age when we can be less reliant on government funding. How are organizations surviving? And so they are making contracts with corporations and businesses to bring in employees as a form of professional development. They're working with different government entities as well to do the same thing. And then they're pulling from traditional sources of private donations and some grants. But they weren't primarily reliant on grants. And that, to me, was what really shows that they're kind of ahead of the grain and being economically viable and thriving. Justice and fairness, like voila, they were very intentional in hiring from within the community. Their farm manager lived, I think, 3 or 4 blocks away, as did many of the other people that work there. Strong communities. When we showed up at City Slicker, there were different residents who were flowing in and out of the space and just talking to Rodney, asking questions, learning about the farm and what all happens there. I recall there was a gentleman that was talking about getting a 4-H club up and going. I know they already had one, but I think he wanted to start a second 4-H club for youth to be involved at the site. So it was a very obviously welcoming, open space. And if you go on their website, you can see the multitude of programs that they offer that allows just about anybody to be plugged in to their farm. Healthy people. I don't think I need to elaborate on this too much. You know, they're producing a lot of healthy food. They're producing healthy activity, mental and physical health. Pretty self-explanatory. Sustainable ecosystems. They're very intentional. They don't use pesticides, chemicals. They organically have remedied the soil to improve the quality of the soil. They have, you can see in the top, chickens there, which they use the manure from to spread around some of the different crops to fertilize the soil. It was a very sustainable farm. And then systems thinking and collaboration. So Rodney, being a grounded visionary and a very brilliant person, realized all the different important values of these whole measures and how they connected to one another, and was very intentional about his relationships, both within the community, of really getting buy-in from the residents there, but also relationships outside of that community at a more regional level with the city, and forging important partnerships with different government entities and nonprofit organizations that would align with the mission of City Slicker Farms. Next slide, please. So I want to conclude with talking about a program that I've been a part of and helped to facilitate here in Milwaukee, that I think is hitting on a lot of the whole measures in our own way. We still have work to do. It's still a relatively new program, but I want to at least kind of provide the 30,000-foot view for those of you who aren't familiar with the program. And I think it's a model that has a lot of potential for expansion, but also duplication in other areas across our state. So Seed Milwaukee was a food insecurity initiative that was launched by Milwaukee County government with one-time funds in 2016. And the goal for the county supervisors who proposed this program was to create new community garden space across the county, partnering with primarily the Milwaukee County Park System. And they ended up deciding that we're going to set the very ambitious goal of creating 1 million square feet of new community garden space across the county in 1 year's time. And so we did that. I managed this program with 60% of my time, and we got 8 community gardens / outdoor classroom spaces launched in 8 different neighborhoods, very different neighborhoods across the county. And you can see in the map that they are quite spread out all across Milwaukee County. 6 of the different 8 sites that we launched by USDA definitions would be considered food deserts, meaning that the proximity to a full-service grocery store, depending on which definition you use, is greater than 1 mile or half a mile or 2 miles away in some cases, and that there's low access to transportation. Next slide, please. So one reason I really wanted to focus on this program or offer this as an example of what we're doing here and feeding different lessons that I learned from our trip in California into this program is that it really is grounded in systems thinking and collaboration. So we weren't given much direction from the county with what to do with this program other than create 1 million square feet of new community garden space, create some new gardens, which in itself is fine, but I wanted to make it bigger than that, and our office wanted to make it bigger than that. And so we determined that we were going to make this a cross-programming initiative that incorporates all 4 program areas of the UW Extension Milwaukee County office into it, and to have as many of our colleagues integrated into this program as possible. So our horticulture urban ag program is involved. We offer different free gardening classes for the sites, both youth and adults. 4-H youth development. This was kind of a harder one to know exactly how this would get involved or how this would integrate into the site, but with our current staff, a lot of the focus is on STEM programming, so science, technology, and engineering, mathematics. And what ended up happening is at several of the different sites, we established new relationships with Journey House and with COA Youth and Family Centers. And since then, STEM clubs have developed at those different sites because of this initial relationship of starting the community garden together. And then the community garden becomes one of the classroom spaces where they're able to offer that STEM programming. Foodwise has brought out nutrition educators to many of our different garden sites for our monthly pop-up community meals or potlucks. And then they also have done kind of mini-series cooking classes / nutrition classes with both youth, for example, youth at our Native Wellness Garden, but also adults. And then community and economic development, my colleague Angie Allen, who may or may not be on this call right now, was really instrumental in helping me organize a team, both within our office, but across Milwaukee County as a advisory committee to support this big program as a whole. And so there's a lot of intentional aspects of community building that went into this, and that became one of our key areas of focus that you'll see below. So the program draws resources and insight from over 25 partner organizations, and that's really what is so essential to the impacts that we've had so far from this program, because if we only had a few different partner organizations, we wouldn't have been able to launch 8 garden sites from the first place. And then beyond that, our programming scope would be very limited, and what we're doing would be uninformed by the needs of the community. We can't be everywhere and know every neighborhood and what their needs are, but our community partners who spend most days within those neighborhoods are much more familiar with the needs of that specific neighborhood. And so they're able to guide us in offering programming that is actually needed and effective in those different neighborhoods. And then areas of impact. So these are the 3 areas that after year 1, which was last year, we decided that we really wanted to hone in on that C could bring the biggest impact from. So food security and well-being, community development, and financial opportunities. And I don't have the time to go into each of those and how those are manifested through different programs. But for now, I will say that for another webinar, but I just wanted to kind of preview what those focus areas are as we continue to grow this program in the coming years, and just kind of introduce you to a little bit of what the program is and what we're doing. So if you want to go to the last slide. And I believe that we have a little bit of time to maybe take a few questions. And are we going to do those questions via the chat box?
I just learned that we can. If anyone has any questions, please ask via chat. I haven't seen any come up right now. I've also just learned that as the host, I can permit anyone who has a speaker in their computer to just ask the question out loud themselves. So if anyone wants to send a message via chat and just say, I have a question to ask aloud, or whatever you want to do, I can give you that voice. Otherwise, just convey your questions in words, and I'll read them. Or comments.
Brian, this is Joseph. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Okay.
This is a great program. You mentioned that they just suggest that we have these needs and we want you to be helping out, but there was no any specific plan and things like that. And being an extension educator, your role is basically capacity development, capacity building.
Right.
So what do you do to ensure that that program could actually continue without your input in the future? Let's say funding gone or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we're continuing to figure out. We have different, I'll give you, I guess, my best response at the time being is that from the beginning, I was really intentional about each of these community gardens being resident driven. So it wasn't extension driven. It wasn't another community organization driven per se. I mean, we have very strong involvement in that, but as much as possible, we had residents personally engaged and involved. And we tried to have each of the different sites have a garden leadership team of at least 2 to 5 people. So that helps to ensure sustainability. So if one person gets ill or moves out of the area, that there's 2-3 people to kind of fall back on and hopefully build out that team again. And then that those teams can make the decisions for the garden and kind of handle the day-to-day conflicts that arise or just decisions that need to be made. And then ultimately, UW Extension and our partners can kind of be the backbone technical support to troubleshoot if there are more significant issues that they're dealing with and they need additional resources. We can help provide that. But it's not sustainable long-term if we have to be micromanaging each garden site. And so try to get away from that model to be empowering the residents to take leadership and ownership of each of the different sites. And ultimately, each site is its own little microcosm, and different approaches are more effective for the site. And we're kind of learning how those different sites operate and how the residents interact with them. So I guess our most important approach was looking at the sites to be as resident managed and driven as possible. And then moving forward, because we were just given one-time funds for the program, we're looking at different ways of revenue generation for programming that we can offer at these sites that would generate small streams of revenue to keep up with the maintenance and the programming at the different sites.
Ryan, I have two questions. They're kind of similar.
Okay.
One came from an anonymous attendee. I think that's an option, and it's in the Q&A section. And then there's another way, you can ask via chat, and that came from Margaret Franchino. I'll just ask them both because they are very similar, and it might be that she asked both questions. How do you get people to attend events in the garden? Yeah, in fact, they're identical questions. How do you get people to attend events in the garden? I have trouble getting people to attend.
Yeah, so I think that goes back to each neighborhood and site being its own little microcosm. And so the demographics and the relationships that are built there are going to determine the approaches that we use. So for one, just starting with relationships, develop some key relationships with neighborhood leaders, folks who are respected within the community and that other residents are going to listen to. That's step number one. From there, finding out, what are the needs of the community? What are the interests of the community? So that you can offer programming and events that attracts their interest. One really simple example would be try to have these monthly potlucks at 5 of the 8 sites throughout the course of the summer into the fall, just as a chance to bring all the gardeners together and residents who aren't gardeners but are interested in the garden, learning about it together. And in doing that, been able to secure a little bit of funds through some partnerships to provide some free food and grill out. And there's not too many people that don't enjoy a good grill out. So, that's a start. One small draw is to offer free food. And then beyond that, adding some sort of educational component or entertainment component. So at some of the community dinners or potlucks, we had cooking classes where our FoodWise educators would come in and teach simple ways of preparing produce from the garden. At other events, I would reach out to local artists, musicians in the area, and have them perform. And at 5 of these sites that are much more residential based, people are just walking by, they'll hear the music, smell the food, and come and check it out and see what it's about. And that's how you get them engaged. But there's also that relationship piece of, for me, it's making phone calls, it's sending out emails at least twice before the event. Personal relationships, I think, goes a long ways if you're able to do that, and making sure that people show up and then that they spread the word about the event.
Here's another question from Patrick Nearing. Do you have a lead volunteer for each garden site? If so, how were they selected and what is their responsibility? What is the succession plan for volunteer leaders who wish to back out of the leadership responsibility or are no longer available?
No, we don't yet have a volunteer leader for each of the garden sites. We have leaders for about half of them. Some of the leaders were just residents who kind of organically rose and got involved and shared their interest and commitment to the garden site and the process of establishing that garden, and then helped to form a team around them. And at a few of the sites, we have master gardener volunteers who kind of take the role of being a leader. In most cases, they live within that community. They're residents, but then they also are very knowledgeable about gardening, and they're able to answer questions that less experienced gardeners have. And so they can kind of serve as the role of being the volunteer leader for that site. But ultimately, our goal is to have each of the sites have a volunteer leader, really to have shared responsibility amongst ideally 3 to 5 leaders. And then it'll be up to those leaders to determine the succession plan of how the responsibilities are shifted, are appropriated, and then if someone is to leave, who takes over that responsibility. One of our more established garden sites is in Bayview in the south side of Milwaukee. It's a more resource site. The folks that live there are more middle class rather than lower class. And so it was easier to get a leadership team together because they have more time and more resources at their dispense. And so we have, I believe, 5 people on the leadership there, and they've already broken it down to kind of the head leader, to the secretary, to the person who sends out the forms to register in the spring, to the person that collects the money from the gardeners, and so on. But a lot of our other sites haven't quite reached that level of formal leadership roles.
So I'm going to do a time check. We're running out of time now. So if you have other questions for Ryan, please go ahead and email him. I'm sure he'd be happy to respond to you. And now we're going to move on and hear from Joseph. Thanks so much, Ryan. And Ryan has to leave early, unfortunately. So thanks so much for sharing your good work.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, is my slide up there?
It sure is.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joseph Mondowal, and I'm here in Shifakan. I hope everybody is warm out there. I had the opportunity to go to California for the first time. For those of you who have not seen me before, I'm from South Sudan, and it was my first time to see California, so very exciting. And thank you to Victoria and Catherine for taking care of all of us while we're there. We're getting well. Next, please. So I'm going to start this by defining, my definition. It's not mine, but what I think would be a good definition for community food system, because that put us in the same page when we talk about this phenomenon. And then I'm going to present some bigger picture of food system beyond what we not at the micro, but also at the global levels. And I'll be sharing my insight from California and what I'm trying to do here in Shivacones. And then my framework that I use to look at development in general, but in this case, community food system. Next slide, please. This is a definition, there are a lot of definitions for this, and I'm sure you know that, but one of the definitions that I like comes from UC Davis that define sustainable food system as a collaborative network that integrate sustainable food production, processing, distribution, consumption, and waste management in order to enhance the environmental, economic, and social health of a particular place. I think Ryan was talking, when he was talking, was looking at this, thinking about this definition and how he was hitting most of these areas. This definition is, to me, is a mirror, for us to be able to locate where there is a malfunctioning, so to speak, in food system, and that every stage from production, processing, all the way to the waste management is a system approach to looking at a food system. And so food system is a concept that is, struggling with recognition, and for a good reason, a lot of politics involved. And so without a lot of lobbies in Washington, D.C. is dependent on collaborations. That means communities working with the farmers and building that relationship and sustaining their own economy. Next slide. So drawn from that definitions are the key elements of food system that is not met by other food systems, such as community food systems. That when we have a high participation of community in food system, then we will be supporting a strong kind of family farms that use sustainable practices. Now, sometimes this generates a lot of discussion. What does it mean? Sustainable practices. Some people think about organic, and some people think about other production. In my case, I believe that yes, organic production doesn't mean sustainable production. You could have organic production that is really unsustainable. That's sometimes create that confusion. If you look at the element of the process consumption all the way to the waste management. A good example is an agriculture that is organic, but look at the labor system. Is it produced by human trafficking, and things like that, what we import from other countries? Do we know actually the method of production? Is not sustainable? Is it a monocropping, for example? Does it improve the soil? That's another issue. Marketing, how is it market processings? Okay, that is a collaborative efforts. Everybody is involved. We know like the use company that we went to, they know from where they buy it, where they throw the unneeded byproducts and all that. You don't see that in other food systems. Equity is another element that is very important. That food system addresses equity in access to food. Job creation also. That if we can develop food system locally, we would be creating a lot of jobs for our people, especially in rural areas. That is the big deal here where I'm in Chifakan. Policies. Okay, are the policies supporting local food production? That is another issue. These are the elements that are critical to the success of community food system. Next slide. I'm just going to share briefly about, like I said, I'm looking at this from the global perspective, just because my research has a lot of global international element to it. I'm looking at the food system as an issue. Is an issue that is facing the humanity in the United States, in other countries, including also the low-income countries. This is a very troubling statistic, as you can look at it there, that we have almost 40% of worldwide, now this is not the United States, that 40%, close to 40% of the population of adults are overweight worldwide. And then this is affecting children more than adults. And I'm not going to go into deep into discussion of that, but this is what a big picture of what food does. Next slide. Just a simple trend of obesity. You can see that is affecting all countries. As countries are growing their economy, and then they have, middle classes growing, and then now they have access to money, and then they can buy more food, then you see the growth of obesity in many countries. Next slide. Ironically, you will also see that we have the obesity as an issue and also malnutrition on the other side. These two coexist in other countries. People have no access to food. In other countries, food is killing people. We have another challenge coming, that in 2050, this is United Nations, in 2050, we will be feeding 9 billion people. Not 9, yes, 9 billion people on the planet. The implication is that we're going to increase the production of food by 60%, even 70%, some are saying that. Now you can think about the environment. What kind of, how do we produce this food? Well, the land is fixed. We cannot increase the land. Okay, we have to have some agricultural intensification, different way of producing food, but how do we do it in that environment? That's another big challenge. That is complicated by the climate change. That I don't talk a lot about this in Chivakana, but it's a big problem. You have people who are actually being displaced. Think about Somalia, for example. drought is displacing people now, not conflict. So you are having what they are calling now environmental refugees, and then you have immigrations, and then the other complex issues that are involved. Here at home in the United States, we have 12% of our people who are in the household who are food secure. It could be more, but this is, this is average. In my count, it's more than that. And it has a rural phase. Next slide. So why do you have to worry about community food system? Well, economics. Okay, we don't see much of this, but I'm sure it's more than that. But you can see a sale of local food in 2012 was 6 billion. Of course, that is a very small percentage of our GDP, but this is very important. Farmers market has grown by 180% since 2000. That is like, how many years ago? 12 years ago. That is incredible. Here in Wisconsin, we're number 8. Good news. Next. So you can see the growth there. That is showing how we are becoming aware of food, and the demand of food is increasing. And the drivers of this are young generation wanting to know where the food comes from. We have programs, farm to school, farm to institutions, SNAP benefits. All those are drivers of demand for local food that we should be capitalizing on. Next. So, given all this background, I started to think more about, okay, how, knowing all that I know that may be not necessarily known to other people, how do I position myself at my work here in Schiffer County to be able to maybe affect change? And so going to California, after 2 years of trying to help with building community food system in Schiffer County, I got a lot of very great information. And Victoria and Ryan, you hit all of this. Building relationship, that was my first thing. So I want to build a relationship before I talk about sustainable agriculture or local food consumption, or I have to know the people. Very critical for my influence. That was in California. Using the food, I don't know about the United States, but in Africa, food as more of social benefit than biological. We need it for our function, but it actually is a part of it's a social things that it can be used to address a lot of social issues, economic, social, political issues. People eat together, they talk together. That's how you address issues. You invite somebody to eat, then you address issues with them. That was in California. You look at all the titles and everything, everywhere we went, it was not about consumption that started those small gardens. It was about something unique. It was about either something social that it was connected to something that was a vision or a mission of that particular group. The determination is what I pick up, that people were trying by all means. I would say they don't sleep. They are trying to look for all the possibilities and innovation and not giving up to be able to address issues using community food system. You can't do that with any other food system. Next slide, please. This is the slicker firm that Ryan was talking about. I was looking at this model. Okay, because for people, cultural change is so complicated. To do it, you have to show some functioning model, something that can, vividly show people that this can be done. And so this firm here had this kitchen, and they were growing the food right there, variety of food. They had chicken actually back there too. they have this integrated at a small scale where they have chicken used to generate biomass and then used as a fertilizer for the farm, and that food comes from there. They have this kitchen there to show people how to cook, how to grow and cook this food. So from the production to the harvesting, of course, they don't transport it here, to the consumption and what they do with the leftovers going back to the farm. So you have an element of nutrient cycle right there. This is a model that I'm trying to push here in Shifakani with my relationship. And if you could go to the next. Well, okay. So one of the issues that we are dealing with here is cooking. Okay, we don't imagine that people don't know how to cook, but sadly, that is a big problem. That you can give people food, green and all that, they will leave it there because they don't know what to do with it. To address that and to increase food consumption, people need to know how to cook. And we can start with the young, generations. And so a model like this could be a multi-purpose center where if we have a short season, 4 months is not too short, but if there's a demand, why not also growing it year long by building hoop houses or things like that and use it for something different, something else. So integrate a multi-purpose center that involve education and food, toward foods and socialization and problem solving and community connection. The element of food of community food system is relationship. You cannot create a relationship if you don't socialize. Next slide. That's Shifakani. And when I was hired 2 years ago, one of the things that was identified as a need in this place was local food. And so when I came, I did an assessment, and also, another assessment was there, but I did my own and it was there. But how do you do it remain to be a serious challenge. How do you do it? So we need this, yes, but how do we do it? It's a problem. Next slide. And so what I've been doing all this time is to try to locate people, because passion is a big problem in food system, especially community food system. Who are those leaders, people who are compassionate about this? How do I find them? That's been my job. What are their goals? These are organizations. These are organizations that are private, publics. Particularly, I'm working now with the Department of Human Services, the school district, the hospitals, and talking about their goals and visions. And now when they do their strategic plannings, my goal is to see that as an opportunity to insert the food system in that. Okay, so if your goal is nutrition, healthy people and all that, then food system is one of this. Yeah, so how do we put that in your vision and community vision and goals? And we can work a plan and evaluation process to do it. Because part of the big things that is lacking even in California was, how do you evaluate all these programs to convince whether policymakers, other people, or funders that this is working? So that's the part of the thing that I'm working with the people here. And so I'm helping with research. I did that with probably 3 organizations to see if their customers would be willing to put more money to buy local food, and they say yes. But we run into issues with the food regulations and all those problems. So let me go very quick. And then next. This is, you're probably familiar with community capital framework. This is a framework that I use in my research, and it's developed by Neil and Jan Flor at Iowa State. If you could go to the next so I can maybe briefly talk about it. So community capital framework is is a framework that is just like asset mappings, but it's more than that because it look at the interaction of those capitals. So you have 7 capitals. In the ping in the center there, you have your goals. Now, you have 3 there: vital economy, social well-being, and healthy economy, ecosystem. Now, there are 3 because I drew this from sustainable agriculture that has 3 legs: economic viability, socially just, and environmentally sound. You can make it more than you want. So this is the intended goal. This is what we want to achieve. Now, all these capitals are to be drawn and mixed in the right way to achieve these goals. And so a lot of social capitals has been talked about when we talk about California, the relationship. Okay, this is what you start with, the social capital. You go to political capitals. Okay, if you have a good social capital, you will be able to come together and talk about, changing policies, for example. So you can see the interrelationship. What are the policies toward food policy in the United States? Financial capital, real capitals. Okay, when you go to the next, I can maybe show some examples. So this is my desired future state. This is something that I'm not making up, is something that is the community looking for. And so I frame it that way. Okay, if this is what you are looking for, vital economy, social well-being, and ecosystem, then these are the capital that you have. And let's see where we are good at and where we are bad at, and how do we get to build that capital using the other capital that we have. For example, social capital. We need a sustained community and institutional engagement in support of local food. We need that. We need a relationship ourselves to do that. Let's look at human capital. Okay, I talk about nutrition, I talk about obesity and all that. They are food related. Okay, how do we build that? Food system is going to play this. Okay, let's teach people how to eat. Let's teach them how to grow. Let's, all that. You're building your human capital apart from your education. Cultural capital, that is the big deal. It's a capital because it can hinder progress or support it. It has to be changed. If people don't know how to cook, it's a problem. If people have never seen broccoli growing, it's a problem. You can go on and on and on. So this is the framework that I'm using here in Chifakani. And the biggest goal that I have here is how to get the food system concept into the vision and missions of all these organizations. They probably have it there, but how do I articulate and say, well, you have this vision here, this is very, very good, but how do you do it? I can bring some resources to that. Next, I think that is, well, thank you to the community food system for supporting my trip, and also for the Leadership Wisconsin for the great experience. I went very quick. If you have any question, I will be happy to answer.
I don't have any questions yet via chat or Q&A. People can type them in. Aaron, did you want to stop pretty much at 1? We're at 1:04 now, or are we okay to go a little longer?
If people have questions, please go ahead, and we certainly understand if people have to leave the call too. So,
okay. Someone just said thanks.
All right, well, I just want to say thank you to our presenters and to Greg and Megan for helping with tech, and thank you to all the attendees for joining us. And, if you're like me, I need a minute or two to process everything. So if you think of questions in the future, please don't hesitate to contact Victoria or Ryan or Joseph. So thanks, everyone. And again, I'll send a link out once it's posted for the recording of the recording.
Well, I'm going to, if I can find the button, I'm going to stop recording, and then I'll do that now.